Hi guys, it is Katie, your CSA coach and dietitian with Shared Legacy Farms. So tonight's topic is freezing garlic and onions, which is kind of like an exit strategy if you feel like you are overwhelmed with garlic and onions, which sometimes that can happen when they're in the extras bin during the CSA program, or if you're just trying to get ahead and do a little bit of food prep. It can be great to kind of prep those things ahead of time and put them in the freezer. Makes it a little bit easier on those rush nights to add some great nutrient-dense options to your foods. So the first thing that I guess we'll talk about is dried or cured garlic that you get a lot of in your CSA boxes. So you get more during the 19 or 20 week season than you're probably going to use over the actual 19 or 20 weeks. So it does stay good for a decent amount of time. You want to store it in a cool, dark place that's fairly well ventilated. You want to wrap it up in a tight bag and throw it someplace. It should be in maybe like a rack of some sort, fairly well ventilated, dark, cool place, not too warm. And if you store it properly, it's going to be good for 3 to 6 months, maybe even a little bit longer. As time goes on, if you notice that it's getting brown or a little mushy or rotten, then you probably want to get rid of it. If you notice that some of the cloves are getting a little mushy, you can still use some of the fresher cloves that maybe aren't bad, and that might be a good idea to kind of get those things in the freezer. But usually 3 to 6 months. The taste can get a little bit stronger or spicier. So some people prefer to kind of freeze it when it's not so spicy, but that's just really personal preference. Onions are kind of the same. Onions can be stored in a cool, dark place, fairly well ventilated, and be good for several months. So we're going to start with freezing garlic, and there's lots of different ways to do this. I know someone commented in the group that they actually just freeze the cloves like this with the skin still on. And when you freeze it like this with the skin still on, that's actually going to prevent it from sticking together. And then you could take a clove out, allow it to thaw out a little bit, and just peel it when you go to use it. When I have frozen garlic, I prefer to peel it ahead of time and just kind of have it more in a ready-to-go type clove, like this. So I peel them and cut them up. So that way they thaw out fairly quickly. When I do go to use them, you can just run them under some warm water. They thaw out fairly quickly. The consistency changes a little bit. They might be a little mushy, not as crisp as normal, but most of the time you're going to be cooking with this garlic, so that doesn't make much of a difference. The taste becomes not so strong, maybe not so spicy, not so garlicky. So when you're using frozen garlic, you might find that you have to use a little bit more in a recipe, but it's not a big taste change. So if I was going to freeze my cloves of garlic, I would just peel them, I chop off the ends, and I would just actually put this whole clove, or maybe cut some of them in half and put them on a cookie sheet to freeze, or a jelly roll pan. The other thing that I like to do is I actually like to press garlic and freeze it. So technically, the good components in garlic, there's a pretty popular one called allicin. In order to activate that component and actually allow the enzyme that's in the garlic to create that allicin that's so good for you, you actually have to crush it or chop it and let it set for almost 10 minutes, anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, before that allicin concentration is fairly high. So when you are cooking with garlic, if you just chop it up and throw it right in the pan, you're really not getting the biggest bang for your buck out of your garlic. You really want to crush it or chop it up, let it set for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and the allicin content in the garlic, the stuff that's so great for your heart and your immune system, will really increase. So try to crush your garlic ahead of time. Do it first. Let it set for a little while. So I have this garlic pressed in here. I really like these garlic presses. I was reading the other day that Julia Child thinks that non-people and non-cooks use these. She thinks they're kind of cheating, but I like it because I know it crushes up the garlic really well, and that means that I'm going to have more nutrients in this garlic, so I don't care what she says when it comes to garlic presses. So I've got this crushed garlic, and then I'm actually going to add some coconut oil to it. So I tend to use coconut oil a lot when I'm cooking or heating up food, whether it's stir fry some veggies or make an omelet. So that's why I'm going to use coconut oil with my garlic. If you tend to use butter or ghee, you could also use those. I prefer to use a solid fat when I'm doing this. I'm not scared to cook with a little bit of solid fat like butter or coconut oil because it's going to make my little garlic cubes a lot easier to make. You could use olive oil if you wanted and then freeze them in little trays like a little ice cube tray, but this just makes it a little bit easier when I go to freeze it on the pan. So I'm kind of estimating that I'm going to use about a 1-to-1 ratio. So I've got like half garlic, half coconut oil here. And I'm going to use these fancy kitchen tools here on your, we should add this to your must-have list, like toddler spoons. They're my favorite for doing this because I think they're pretty easy to use. And I'm actually just going to mix that garlic and coconut oil together. So this isn't something that I would probably do if I was in a rush and just trying to freeze my garlic because maybe I noticed it was going bad. I probably would just peel off the clothes like that. But I'm doing this for more of fast food prep to prepare for later. So those rushed evenings when I'm trying to add some good flavor to food and I'm trying to save every minute that I can. That's what I'm making these little like garlic cooking bombs for. So I'm actually going to freeze them like this. And secretly I really want to make these in like really nice little circles, but that's not always that realistic. So we're going to freeze these in our cooking oil. And then when they're frozen on the tray, we're going to end up putting them in a Ziploc bag, and they will stay in their little kind of balls here. And that way when we go to stir fry something or want to add a little garlic to an omelet or some garlic to some cooked greens or something, we can just grab one of those out of our freezer bag pretty quickly and throw it in whatever dish we want. So we've got really 3 ways that we can freeze garlic. We've got our whole cloves like this with the skin on. We've got cutting it up, so just save a little bit of time later. Easy to use cloves, run under warm water, thaw them out fast, chop them up. And then we've got already crushed garlic and some sort of fat or oil, like coconut oil, butter, that we will freeze that are even really gonna save us even more time in the kitchen later on. So those are our 3 ways to freeze garlic. Once frozen, it's going to be good for at least 6 months in your freezer. So this is something that's great to do when you are overwhelmed with garlic during the CSA season. Just kind of prep ahead for those winter months. All right, so the next thing that we're going to talk about are freezing onions. And again, that's something you can do when you're overwhelmed with onions, or maybe there are some onions and some extras. I like to do it just to kind of get ahead with food prep so that way I don't have to chop up onions all the time. So kind of knocking some of that out. You don't want to freeze the peel, so you want to go ahead and remove the peel. I'm sure that most of you know now that you will put the peel in your veggie scrap bag, right? So we can use that for veggie broth later, or if we're gonna make bone broth or soup stock. So you don't freeze the peel. You want to go ahead and get that off. I like to chop up the onions before I freeze them. Although you can freeze an onion is giving me a hard time. You can freeze an onion whole, but if you freeze an onion whole, or even in a half like this, you have to blanch it first. So what you would do is you would boil some water, you would throw the entire onion in the boiling water from anywhere for 2 to 3 minutes, depending on the size of the onion, because it has to cook all the way through. You would then remove it from the water, put it in a quick ice bath, and then let it dry for a little bit before you freeze it. I actually have never done that. It sounds like a lot of work, and I'm still gonna have to take that onion out, let it thaw, and chop it up. So I like to kind of get everything done ahead of time, because that's why I love the freezer so much. It's gonna save us time later. So I actually put this onion in the refrigerator today because I heard that that really helps decrease the sensitivity or decrease some of the stuff that makes me tear up, and it's actually, I feel like it's kind of working, which is awesome. I don't know, those Shared Legacy Farms onions are pretty pretty strong, so we'll have to kind of test that out this summer. But I'm just gonna chop this up. Nothing fancy. If you tend to use onions in larger pieces, you could chop it up in larger pieces. Once you freeze onions, they're not going to be super crispy, like to use on top of a salad probably. They're going to be a little bit softer and mushier once you let them thaw out. But when you freeze them, you can just take them right out of the freezer and add them to whatever dish you're cooking. So like a stir fry, a soup, any dish that you're heating up. You're just not going to want to let them thaw out and add them to like a cold salad, because they are going to be a little bit softer. Ooh.
That's
Good thing you didn't sharpen this knife today.
Yeah.
All right, so this pan is a little crowded. Move this around a little bit. So the reason that I freeze it all on the pan first is to prevent it from all sticking together in a bag. So I would put all my onions and all my garlic, probably doing this at 2 separate times, on some sheet trays, put them in the freezer for a few hours, let them freeze pretty much all the way through before I actually add them to a Ziploc baggie to store in the freezer for good. So give me 1 second, I'm gonna quick grab that. So this tray is actually frozen. So what I will do is I will take my whole garlic here, and now that they're frozen, they're not going to stick together in this bag, so when I go to use them, I'm just going to be able to grab one out or several out quickly without having to break things apart. And then here are my garlic with coconut oil. And again, I'm just gonna fill up this bag, and that way I can grab a few of them and use as many as I need of this already chopped up garlic. Now, hopefully, because I chopped this or crushed the garlic, pressed the garlic first, it has a fairly decent amount of that allicin that we talked about. So then I have these frozen onions that you can see really worked out well by freezing them on the tray first. You can use small bags, you can use large bags. So by freezing them on the tray first, that is really going to allow me to just go and grab this big bag of onions and get out however much I need for that day or that meal, because they're not going to stick together. So that's a lot better than throwing these fresh onions right in the bag, because they're probably going to end up sticking together a lot more. So that is it. That is freezing garlic and freezing onions. Super easy to do, and again, going to save you a lot of time in the kitchen on those rushed nights, and just going to allow you to add a lot more local flavor to your food and a lot more nutrients. So get freezing.